everybody! Welcome to Let's Look at Back to Bed. Back to Bed is newly available on Steam as of the day that this video is uploaded, August 6, 2014. It is an isometric, MC Escher-esque, narcolepsy-based platformer, puzzler. Not platformer at all, it's exclusively a puzzler. I'm so used to saying indie puzzle platformer, but those days are at least a little bit past. This is a game that has a little bit of history associated with it. Some people covered it back in 2012, 2013. It was a student project, originally by some, I think, Norwegian developers. I normally don't mention ethnicity in case I get it wrong, because it's just rife for, you know, disaster. But in any case, it was kickstarted in February of 2013. They asked for $12,000. They got $13,000, and now it is available on Steam for a price that is indeterminate. I actually don't know what it is because the store page doesn't list a price yet. I'm gonna guess 10 or 15 bucks. Probably 15, but in any case, you can check that out for yourself. What is Back to Bed? Well, the easiest way to explain what Back to Bed is to actually play it here. So we're gonna start in on some of these early levels. I haven't unlocked, you know, Rooftop Trouble or Harbor Hazards yet. I assume that there are more levels than those, but I can't totally be sure. But we're gonna start on Rooftop Trouble, the easiest levels. Basically, these are chapters. Each chapter consists of 15 levels. Just checking. And we're gonna start on maybe level 1. Just because in these puzzle games, I like to, you know, go back to levels that I've done before so I don't get stumped for like half an hour at a time and just end up being like, fuck this game, I'm stupid. So Back to Bed is a game ostensibly about this character named Bob. Bob has narcolepsy. Narcolepsy means he falls asleep at periods when he doesn't wish to fall asleep. Hey, I get sleepy too. I have narcolepsy, right guys? Ha ha ha. No, it's a real condition, okay? You jerkwad, stop trying to make everything about you. And, you know, maybe this is nice as a point of reference for narcolepsy that is induced Bigelow, male gigolo. So our goal is to get Bob safely to bed. Sounds easy, is not so easy. This is kind of a simulation of, you know, trying to stop someone, a loved one perhaps, from walking out their window while sleepwalking. So we're using our Sega Genesis controller, as you can see from that controller prompt. Just kidding. The Sega Genesis controller has 6 face buttons, obviously. Our goal in the game is very, very simple. We control this kind of goat with a human face. Get used to it. The game's got some, you know, idiosyncrasies. It's quirky, it's strange, if you will. All we have to do is basically manipulate the environment in such a way that Bob gets to his bed safely without falling off the roof. We can't fall off roofs. Bob can fall off roofs. This is what's dangerous for us. We play the role of like his, you know, his companion that helps him out, you know? The spirit guiding his presence from the dream world in order to make sure that he doesn't die. So Bob rotates clockwise, which means basically if you're from Bob's perspective, every time he encounters an obstacle that makes it impossible for him to pass, he turns to the right. So what we have to do is put down obstacles in such a way as to get him to turn in such a way, we can fast forward by the way, which I'm going to do for some of these very early levels, in order to get him to basically walk down a specific line in order to get to bed. These levels in the first chapter start out very, very easy, but quite quickly get extremely difficult. As you will see, he turns to the right, so we'll put this down there. Get extremely difficult, and by the second chapter, roughly midway through, I found myself in some levels where, you know, I play for like 10 minutes, don't come up with a solution. Gotta take a little bit of a break, you know, get my wits back about me, come back into it with a fresh set of eyes, and then all of a sudden I find myself having a much better chance to actually succeed. So we can, you know, it gives you a preview of Bob's footsteps, but using, you know, the power of foresight, you can kind of see for yourself. He's gonna walk down here. What's gonna happen? Well, if I let him go, I will let him go just so you can see what happens. If I let him go, he just falls off the edge here. Now that is a failure condition, but it doesn't put him into a fail state. It just causes him to respawn where he originally started, which means we can just put this back down here and do this. The game strikes a pretty even mix, I would say, of like, you know, planning and execution, if that makes sense. Some puzzle games, something like Space Chem, for example, rings true right now or comes to mind, are mostly about planning. You come up with a system, I'll fast forward a little bit, not to bore you here. You come up with a system, you put the mechanics of the system in place, the atoms go through, it creates the molecule. Or it doesn't, if you messed it up. And then there are other puzzle games, I'm thinking of something along the lines of like, I don't know, Braid right now is maybe a decent example, where execution's important. You know, you can have the conceit in your mind of how to do the puzzle, but there's things that have to be executed on the fly. Back to Bed is a little bit of both. There's not very many levels in the game that are just, we can walk up these stairs and change our plane, by the way. There aren't very many levels that you can just, quote-unquote, set it and forget it, where you can just, drop down a couple of apples and then you're done. Usually you have to manipulate the objects. He's gonna turn right. I think we want to do, like, where is this guy gonna end up? He's caught in an infinite loop here, so let's take a second to talk. But yeah, there's not many levels where you just put down your objects and then let him go, and then that's the end, like you've made like a little track for him to go down. Usually you get one fewer objects than you would need to do that, so you need to move an object or manipulate objects you've already placed for an earlier purpose. Now, I think we can get him to rotate here, and that'll just send him backwards, and then this is a very easy puzzle solution. I think the game does difficulty curve extremely well. The first chapter, pretty easy. Usually, you can get the solution on a sight read, or you can watch Bob walk around for a little bit and then figure it out. The second level, or the second chapter, I've had to do a lot of like trial and error style experimentation, and there's a lot more execution-based stuff. There's a lot of stuff where you have to, manipulate multiple objects on the fly. And we're not exclusively using just apples, so eventually we'll be able to create bridges and, use other kind of obstacles. So he'll go down here. Then he'll go back this way, and then we want to put, okay, so this is one where we probably just want to put this apple right here. And then when he comes back, he'll walk into it. Yeah, good. Yeah, we'll see when we get to the second chapter. Let me just put it that way. Overall, I actually have liked Back to Bed quite a lot. It's a lot different from a lot of the indie puzzlers you play. You play a lot of Match 3 games. You play a lot of, puzzle platformers, stuff like The Bridge, Vessel, Braid, etc. But yeah, stuff like that, along those lines. The Swapper. This is a kind of puzzler that I've never really seen before, and I think it benefits from that kind of novelty. It's not necessarily the kind of thing I can see everybody getting down with, but I've had a really good time with it so far, and the weird vibe to it is definitely one of its strengths as well, I would say. He's gonna walk off the edge if we do that. This one might be up. No, this should be fine if we just put this down here. I think I overreacted there. Sometimes the perspective can be a little tricky to see, but that's why you've got the, tiled grids on the ground, so it's a little bit easier to line up things. But the visual style is definitely a strength of the game as well. This kind of like MC Escher-esque style thing that we've got going on here. So this introduces some portals to us. So he's gonna walk in here, boom, 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 boom. He gets caught in an infinite loop. But after he goes through this section, if we put this here... Yeah. Okay, so this will bounce him back in the opposite direction that we want. This is a little trick. If we block him off here, he'll just get reflected back in the opposite direction, which is perfect, because we want him to actually go through this portal. And when he goes through this portal, he'll come out here, and then we just pop this down, and Bob's your uncle. Bob is also safe, so that's good for your family, I suppose. You don't want to end up with, domestic, tragedy or something like that. So we'll speed through some of these, earlier levels, just because we are at the point where I think I've explained the basic mechanics enough that you can probably figure out mostly what's going on for yourself. We want to reflect him over like this, and that'll be good. You kind of just get an intuitive feel for how it works. It's one of those things where as soon as you get introduced to it, you're like, whoa, this is kind of weird. I gotta take a second to get my bearings, get calibrated. And then eventually you're like, okay, Bob follows a very, very simple set of rules. Those rules kind of get internalized in your brain, and you can solve the puzzles much more fluidly and much more quickly. The first time maybe is a different story, though. Sometimes they do end up being a little tricky. You benefit from experimentation. There's these little story vignettes that happen, as is fairly typical for, indie puzzlers. For the most part, at least. There are some notable exceptions, but for the most part, I find the story kind of like, secondary to the gameplay, which is not necessarily a negative, but is more just to say, the story doesn't necessarily titillate me that much, but it does have kind of this, like, fantastical nature going on. It more serves to get you in kind of the mood or the atmosphere of the game than it does to, enlighten you or tell you a story in particular. So, yeah, it works for what it does, but certainly nobody is going to be playing this and saying, like, oh, I was really, really moved by the story of Back to Bed. At least that's my expectation. So if I remember correctly, I think we have to reflect him back this way, and then that will pretty much just be good to go. It is actually amazing how much easier these first chapter levels are than the ones that come after them. Once we get to the second chapter, you'll see some tricky stuff as more and more elements get introduced. But I really, I mentioned this in my Let's Look At for Lovely Planet, but I really like when games do this. They have kind of like one tutorial world, and then, do we want to reflect him back? I didn't think we did. This is not how I want to do this. Oh, we need to walk over this way. So Bob's going to die here, but that's okay. I mentioned this in my review of Lovely Planet, or my video, because it's not really a review of Lovely Planet, but I really appreciate when games have kind of the, like, first world is a tutorial, even if it does seem kind of exhaustive, and then the second world is where things get more difficult. Oh, we're already done here. Because I quite oftentimes find that with a lot of puzzlers, things get a little bit too hairy too quickly, so I can beat like 5 or 6 levels, no problem, and then by, you know, the second half dozen, I find myself in a, you know, insurmountable position, because I'm not very good at puzzle games, I'll admit. But it's been a pretty good year for indie puzzlers. I kind of like Mousecraft as well, but Back to Bed is quite cool, I think. All right, so how are we going to reflect him here? He's not, is he caught in an infinite loop? He is caught in an infinite loop. What that means is we can just put one right here, send him over across that bridge, and then put one right here, and that should be able to reflect him, or refract him, into bed there. I apologize for kind of speeding through things, but, you know, once you get the solution of the level, I think it makes sense for me, at least. Those clocks, by the way, they follow the same rules as Bob. They're just faster, and if they touch Bob, they wake him up, which actually causes a fail state. One of the few things I don't like about the game is he's going to turn to the right, which we want to do here, I think. 1 second, I need to think about this. So he's going to get reflected back, and then we'll put one here, and he'll turn to the... Oh, this will be the solution. Yeah, one of the few things I don't like about the game is that, well, when Bob falls off the edge, he just respawns in his origin, right? He respawns at the tile that he started at with the movement that he started at, and you just repeat the pattern, and you can test it multiple times. If Bob gets touched by a clock, or there's other obstacles that this can also apply to, what happens is... Oh, we can just come up this way, okay. He screams out, he wakes up, and then you have to reset the game to an earlier time, basically. And it makes sense because, you know, the clocks follow different logic. They just can't be reset to their starting points, I guess. But it is still kind of frustrating to have to restart a level as opposed to the more fluid nature of it, the way it's worked before. I think we want to reflect him like here. And then I'll send him up the stairs, and then he'll get turned up here, and yeah, we're perfect. Okay. Oh, no, that wasn't quite right. This is fine. We can still put him back in this little section here. We want to do it like this. Yeah, this will get it sorted. Okay. Fair enough. A slight mistake. Not every mistake leads to a fail state. So yeah, I wish it was kind of a little bit more elegant about the way that it handled those kind of like clock fail states, but apart from that, it's a relatively minor complaint. So the way that things go here, we're gonna reflect him back down this way. He's gonna walk through a portal. Oh no, we gotta put this here so he walks through the portal. And then we abuse perspective a little bit by putting this down here, and this apple will allow Bob to get to the exit. That might be the last level of the first chapter, actually. No, maybe second last level. This is not going to be a back-to-bed walkthrough for a number of different reasons. That clock might actually end up catching him unless I do something like maybe this. Yeah, he'll eventually just fall off the edge because he follows the same logic as Bob. Bob is gonna come down here, 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 here. He walks through this. Where do I want to put him? He walks down here. I'm Bob. And then he'll turn right, and this will take him not quite through the exit. So, oh, I botched this again. All right, Bob, thank you for moving so slowly. I appreciate this. So this is the way we want to put him through. No, it's not. This is the way we want to put him through, but then he'll reflect off this. This is the way we want to put him through, but then we need to reflect him back a little bit. So we'll put like one here, and then one here. You gotta be quick on these. And then one here, and that'll rotate him through to the exit. All right, a little bit trickier, but we ended up getting the job done there. So this is the start of the second chapter here, so you'll see things get a little bit more difficult. Overall, how do I feel about Back to Bed? I'll pause the game quickly here. I've been using keyboard, I've been using controller, by the way, just keyboard and mouse to kind of pause a little bit. The developers recommended using a controller, and the gameplay controls fine using a controller. In the menus, it's a little non-apparent, like where your control is, if that makes sense. Like sometimes it's not clear what selection you have highlighted and stuff like that. Just weird little kind of UI quirks, but you know, these Let's Look Ats very rarely end up being like stack of things on one side that I like, things I dislike on the other side, and then, you know, sum them together and see what the solution is. It's a game that's charming enough where the UI quirks don't really strike me as an enormous negative. But yeah, Back to Bed, how do I feel about it? It's probably not going to end up being anybody's favorite game of the year, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But it's a game that I think is worth playing if you're a fan of puzzlers. In particular, this kind of has like a weird... I know graphically it doesn't feel like this, but it has kind of like an old PC or SNES feel to it, where the mechanics feel like something that could have been done, you know, 30 years ago or 20 years ago. But it's got this cool, again, MC Escher-esque kind of aesthetic painted over top, and it's surprisingly satisfying and surprisingly addictive as well. I know that when I, you know, knew the conceit of the game and I was considering whether or not I wanted to cover it, I was like, I don't know, this sounds like if you fail a lot it could be kind of tedious. And of course, as with a lot of puzzle games, it gets a little frustrating when you fail over and over and over. But, you know, like most puzzle games, it's never really the game's fault, and it never feels like the game, at least thus far in my hour or so of play, has really ramped up the difficulty like crazy out of nowhere and given you like some element you don't know what to deal with. Usually it seems like it's a pretty gentle slope, and it's, you know, as satisfying as it is frustrating. Anyway, I like it. At the very least, if you're not going to pick this up at full price, but it looks like it might be up your alley, this is something that I would definitely give my thumbs up to. So if you're watching this later and it's on sale or something on Steam, then by all means, I would give this... Oh, I let Bob fall into the Sarlacc pit. That was pretty silly of me. Yeah, I give it my seal of approval for sure. I don't exactly know how long it is. That's something that you can probably research for yourself. But I've had a good time with it thus far, and especially for people who are not necessarily amazing at puzzle games and maybe find some other puzzle games a little bit intimidating. This one, not to say that it's not difficult, but has struck me thus far as being a little bit gentler on kind of like the learning curve side of things. I found it pretty easy to get in and get acclimated, feel comfortable, and then they start throwing these really weird obstacles at you, like these lips that blow and they push Bob, and you've got to kind of figure out how to manipulate them. I know exactly what level I'm going to actually play until, and that's where things get exceptionally difficult. I don't really want to reflect him back this way. How do I want to do this? Like this, maybe. Then he'll walk backwards. Ah, yes, this is perfect. And then we'll just block off, because it's physics-based. We'll block off that air, and he'll walk into the exit. So where things get difficult is where they start introducing these bridges. At least where I've found they've gotten difficult thus far is these bridges. And I don't think this level introduces them, but next level probably does. So, Bob walks up here. He gets blown away by this thing. We don't want that. Instead, we'll reflect him that way. Oh, what have I done? I've done a bad thing. That's fine. Okay, let's fast forward. Okay, Bob walks over here. And then... Oh! I gotta wait because he keeps getting blown by the air because I'm picking up the apple too fast. There we go. I'm gonna put this like here, and that'll reflect him back this way. And then we want to put like this down here or something, but then he's gonna get blown off the edge, is he not? He does. So maybe we want to reflect him a little earlier and then block off the air. Yeah. Maybe we want to try something like this. Oh, this is where we want to be, because that'll reflect him perfectly. Then we don't need this apple, and we can just use this apple to do that. All right. Just a couple more levels here. I don't want to get too tricky on things, but I think this is where they start introducing the fish. Yeah, okay, so the fish is basically a bridge. And when you have to start manipulating these is where it gets really, really tricky, I think, at least. So we put that fish back over there. This will reflect him back this way. I am this talking goat now. It's got a little bit of a Seaman vibe from the, you know, Sega Genesis era? I forgot what Seaman actually was for. It might have been Dreamcast. I can't remember. And, oh, this is not gonna do it. He's gonna, oh, reflect backwards? Oh no, what have I done? And then he's gonna reflect backwards again. I gotta get him to turn right here. Oh, that should get the job done. maybe one more level. Just because I want to show off as things get more difficult. Was this the one that really bugged me? It was not. So maybe we'll actually stop right here. I think we've shown off enough of Back to Bed. I want to avoid spoiling some of the, you know, things that you should experiment and figure out for yourself. I think Back to Bed is pretty good. That's my seal of approval. Not necessarily a must-buy, but certainly a unique game. Fun to play. Surprisingly, a lot of puzzle games end up being, like, feeling more like an intellectual exercise. This feels more like Sudoku, you know? It feels like you're doing a crossword puzzle. It's not a word search. It's a crossword puzzle, but that being said, it's still fun and stimulating, and I like it. I would recommend it if you're interested, and you know, if you don't want to pick it up at full price, no skin off my scrotum, you can look for it in a sale. But you know, this is my consumer awareness. This game is good. Seal of approval. As always, if you want to check it out, there will be a link to pick it up on Steam in the video description below. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, if and only if you enjoyed the video, click the like button. It helps me out a great deal. And subscribe if you want to see more first impressions like this in the future. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.